Good evening. Oh, we're here. Good evening. That's a bit easier with a mic. Settle down now, please. I know we're all excited to be here. I appreciate it got hot in the last room. It's a little bit cooler in here, thankfully. There's a lot of excitable energy, so really appreciate everybody making an effort tonight. As you can see, we sold out and then we sold a little bit more. We're packing the room out this evening, but I really appreciate you coming down. We've got a fully packed event with some world-class speakers. You know, we're very careful with the individuals that we invite to speak on these stages because we want to maximize the value that you'll get. So just in terms of the evening, I'm just going to do a brief introduction and overview. Then I'm going to invite Liam up, who's a representative and sales leader at 6 Cents, one of our latest partners. And then we're going to kick off with our first speaker. However, I couldn't do this job by myself anymore because people suggested I needed a little bit of extra assistance. So I'm very grateful that we've got the one and only Owen Richards, who is the CEO and founder of Air Marketing. So let's have a round of applause for Owen, please. Honestly, it's like as some of you may have seen last week, it's actually our 5th year that we've been running sales confidence events, and the nature of being an events business, we did manage to just survive the pandemic, and thankfully it's because of the partners that you can see mentioned up above behind me, and also great people like Owen that continue to build this community. So we're just going to open up, share a few words, and then we get started. What would you like to share, Owen? Got anything on your mind?
Only that I preferred virtual events because it reminds me how short I am compared to... So when you take a selfie and he says, do you want me to duck down? That really sets the tone for the day. But no, it's great to be. It's really good to be back. We did this event at this venue in November. And I think we probably had a third of the people that we've got today in the room. So it's really nice to be back and to see people ready, willing and raring to go. The noise coming through the room just now was incredible. And I'm sure you'll agree, it's great to be back face to face with people. So no, it's fantastic to be here. This is what sales confidence should look like. Really good start.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just highlight, I know a couple of you mentioned the inadequacies with the name badges downstairs. Just to highlight that the people that are helping downstairs, they're not my team. And I mean this positively. No.
I feel like I should stick up for you, Elaine.
That came out wrong. I actually wanted to say that one of our important partners, Elaine, the founder, and her team are Venetrix. So if you are looking for SDRs and you're hiring SDRs right now, make sure you speak to Elaine and her team. Stand up at Venetrix. There you go.
And if it wasn't for them, they'd have no name badges. So.
Yeah. Also, I'm just going to get people to stand up because we haven't seen a few faces for a while. The idea is that we want you to make connections with everybody in the room and just orientate yourself with a group of people that are obviously participating and helping put this event on. Just stand up. Where's the Sales Loft crowd? Stand up. Sales Loft. Where's Sales Loft? Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. And then where's the Varison crew? Varison? Where are you? Chloe and Chris, thank you very much. Gong, anybody from Gong? Yes, Sarah. And Nicola's going to be speaking tonight, thank you. And then Team Zoom Info, where are you? Good, thank you. And we've got Ali opening up. And then we've got 6 Cents will come up in a minute. And then just a thanks to Air, Allego. Cognizant are in the room as well. Where are the Cognizant crew? There we go. And then we've got Get Accept that have flown in from the Nordics. Round of applause to them. They've come all the way.
We never recognise them.
Just for this event. And then Adam from Big Tin Can. Where's Adam from Big Tin Can and his team? And then finally Jiminy. Where's the Jiminy crew? There you go. Thank you. So thanks very much for being part of this event. It wouldn't happen without the partners and support. So, look out for their connection requests and make sure you heard about them. Tell them you heard about them at my event. So firstly, I'd like to just invite up Liam from 6 Cents. Can we have a round of applause, please? I'm going to give him the mic. So one of the great things about building this community in the UK is that we get to launch new technologies that are looking to add value to the network and sales go-to-market leaders like yourself that are building out the marketplace. So I'm really excited that Sixth Sense have come on board. And I just want to share a little bit from Liam, learn a little bit about him as an individual leader, because I think there's an interesting backstory. Hear about the value proposition of Sixth Sense and what they're looking to do in support of sales confidence. So over to you, Liam.
Yeah, appreciate it. And James, thanks so much for having Sixth Sense here tonight. Congratulations on 5 years.
Thanks.
That's fantastic. It is my first sales confidence event, so I'm a sales confidence virgin tonight, but I have been on the other side of the world, so I'll give myself an excuse for not being here, but pleasure to be joining you. So yeah, as James introduced, Liam Wedderburn, I lead our commercial sales group with Sixth Sense. I have been selling software or tech in some sense for 10 years, and for the last 4 years focused on building out sales teams, specifically in the SaaS space. As I kind of alluded to there, just moved back to the UK. I've been in Canada for the last 5 years. There is a Geordie accent in there somewhere, if anyone was wondering. But people keep telling me it's now Canadian, so sorry to offend any Canadians, but I hope not. But yeah, very much excited to be with the group. I'm not on my own. There are some other Sixth Senses somewhere. Give us a wave, right in the middle there. So yeah, excited to be with the whole group tonight.
Awesome. And, just from an understanding, because I know people have started to see Sixth Sense around, and, you've been one of the fortunate companies that are still powering through, some of the other headwinds that other companies are feeling. What is Sixth Sense's proposition, like value prop? What are you actually doing? What does Sixth Sense do?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. Maybe without too much audience participation, maybe I'll ask a question just like, how many people would say they actually know what Sixth Sense does now versus don't? All right, so I could tell you guys anything. Fantastic. Okay, so Sixth Sense is really a revenue AI platform. That's what we call it. And so first question, like, what on earth is that, right? And we exist, or the problem that we solve, James, is the guesswork that exists within revenue teams, within sales and marketing today, right? So by guesswork, I'm talking about, where do we put our resources? Where do we spend our time? Which accounts do we go after? Right? And it's that guesswork that leads to inefficiency, right, in our teams. And some of the things I think that cause that are the fact that today, 70% of the buyer's journey is anonymous to us, is anonymous to people like us, sellers. I was chatting to someone earlier about kind of addressable markets. As little as 3 to 5% of our addressable market is in market at any one time, right? And when we don't spend the time to figure out or to uncover the insights to know who is in market, where should I be spending my time, it leads to that lack of process and lack of where we want to focus. So we don't know which industry to focus on. We don't know which accounts to focus on. We don't know what messaging will resonate. And I've guessed it all. I've guessed what industry should we go after, what accounts should we focus on. I've guessed all of that. So really, Sixth Sense removes that guesswork. And the way we do that is Sixth Sense analyzes millions of signals in the market, and we can talk a little bit about what data goes into that. But we remove the guesswork by understanding which accounts are in market, what stage of the journey are they in at any particular time, and what are they looking at? What are they actually interested in? And when we do that, we can focus our efforts, focus our teams on the right accounts. We can increase productivity, and ultimately, what we want to do is, help teams to predictably and accurately forecast revenue and know where they're going to land, right? By knowing which accounts to focus on, who's in market. So.
Awesome. So we'll be telling more of that narrative as the months go on. I guess why did you guys decide to partner with Sales Confidence?
Yeah, maybe two reasons, maybe a personal and a business one there. So from a business point of view, Sixth Sense has long, and with our history as a US organization, we have long invested in community. So our CMO, Leah Latney, runs a kind of a CMO community. Our VP of Sales, Mark, does a very similar thing. So we've always wanted to be an organization that invests heavily in community. And to that point, I just said, helping revenue leaders gain confidence in predictable revenue. And hey, back to what you've built here, we want to be a part of that and help bring that to this audience. From a personal point of view, I mentioned scaling sales teams. That's kind of what I'm focused on right now, Sixth Sense has identified an opportunity to responsibly scale and capture market opportunity here in Europe, and we're doing that right now. And so very keen to connect with sales leaders who are doing a similar thing and building teams in the market right now.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Round of
Perfect.
applause
Thank you, James.
for Liam.
We're ready to rock. Okay, we're going to get our first speaker up. First speaker is Ali Syed, who's the Director of International Revenue and Growth at ZoomInfo. We've got a crowd from ZoomInfo tonight, I think. How many have we got from ZoomInfo? Oh, good number. Very good work. Like that. So Ali is going to be talking about the benefits of diversity in sales teams. Just a bit about Ali if you don't already know him. So he joined ZoomInfo earlier this year, previously led sales teams at Oracle, Expedia, Attest, and at Google as well. If you don't know ZoomInfo, where have you been? ZoomInfo is a global leader in go-to-market intelligence solutions. Their platform empowers business-to-business sales, marketing, and recruiting professionals to hit their number by pairing best-in-class technology with unrivaled data. Ali is on a lapel mic and is going to head up to the stage now. Please welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks, Owen. When I look around the room today, I look at the faces here and I think there is a great opportunity for us to really drive diversity in our business. I can see that we've done a great job across the organizations that are here today with the leaders that we have, but there's places for us to go more. So with that, I'm going to talk to you about my story and how we can actually activate that and create real opportunity for us in the marketplace. There we go. Got you. So who is this strapping young lad? 50 years ago, my father decided to come to the UK, leaving his family behind and deciding to start a new life in the UK. Why did he decide to do that? Against the wishes of his parents, against a wish of moving into a career, into having a military career. But he did it to be able to prove to himself and to others the drive of being able to want to find a better life in the UK. 10 years on, over here, we kind of see that he's kept the ambition with the Mercedes, but not with the outfit. So obviously he's really kind of decided here that 50 years ago that he has got a thing to prove. He came here to decide to leave something behind and drive on a new decision or a new career for himself. But his reasons to do this were twofold now. One, he's here on his own, and two, he also has to prove back home that the reason why he moved was a valuable reason as well. So when I think about that, I think about the hard work that has to go into that. 3 or 4 jobs to work to be able to afford to live and rent in a crowded apartment with other individuals that are looking to try and achieve the same thing. Those are innate things that get built into individuals that you can't talk about on a CV. These are things that you cannot express it. Sometimes, arguably, you can't even ask those questions from a HR perspective to talk for people to allow them to talk about their story. So how do you draw out this information? How do you recognize these soft skills that don't actually represent themselves on a piece of paper? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about today, because the proof is in those sales leaders or in those sales teams that are actually delivering success through driving diversity in their business. So when I talk about the data that's going to come up in just a second, I want you guys to think about today how you can break the status quo. Think about across all those different diversity. My experience is about ethnicity, but there is a socioeconomic background. There are sexual orientation, gender. There are so many different ways to categorize diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do you do that when sometimes you are restricted to be able to do it? Well, actually, we need to start from the beginning. And what does that beginning look like? Thank you. But first, before we talk about what you can do to activate that, I want to talk about some real proof points that why you should care in this room. As sales leaders, we always care about the number. The number is all we care about, but is it the only thing that we should be caring about? What this tells us is that sales leaders that were interviewed back in 2021 from a Forrester research report, over 500 B2B leaders had identified that diversity in their sales teams proves success. And if you can see to the right of this here, we can see this from leaders to laggards, where opportunity conversion from leads to opportunity actually goes from 26% down to up to 54%, just on conversion of opportunities. Just think about what your pipeline might look like by adding those extra 30-odd points. When we go even further down the pipeline funnel and you look about opportunity to customer, we can see there from laggards to leaders, you're going from 19% to 24%. That is a massive jump, especially when you are looking at millions of dollars of responsibility in this room. So when you think about that, this is what you should be thinking about when you start thinking about a recruitment policy or a hiring policy that is going to drive diversity and inclusion in your business. There we go. So when I'm up here, and I sound like I'm preaching a little bit, so I do apologize, but we are also putting this proof into practice as well. This is just a representation of Zoom Info's leadership team in London as we officially launched our office in May. So you can see here, we have got a huge representation in this room, not just from leadership, all the way down to our individual contributors as well. And this, for me, is a really proud moment to be able to talk about this, because actually it proves success based on the previous slide that I've just showed you. So my final point really to bring to you today is that what you can do today, or what you can take back with you in your organizations to really be able to start driving a diversity-focused, inclusive-focused approach to your hiring methodology. The first one is about auditing your process. Does your process today contain unconscious bias? And the way that you look at unconscious bias is by actually really looking at every stage of your recruitment methodology. Are you identifying areas here? Apologies, I think you can see that immediately. But the first things could be so simple, like using a tool or a product like Grammarly on your description, on your job descriptions. How inclusive are your sales profiles that might be focused heavily towards A or alpha male individuals? That you are immediately taking away a huge proportion of opportunity or of talent pool there straight away. The second thing that you could potentially do is also blinding your CVs. So when they come over from your recruitment team, remove names off the CVs immediately. So you're really just looking at the language, the experience, and the talent that you're looking to bring into your business. Standardizing the process is really, really important. One of the things that I think that when we can start looking at stack ranking, when you're particularly going through a growth phase, is identifying a rubrics where every single hiring individual that is across your team is using the same sets of questions. These questions enable you to really get to the heart of what it is that you're trying to hire for. And it removes any bias out of the equation that tends to creep in. It's unconscious. It happens to me. It happens to everyone. And finally, when we talk about culture fit, actually, I think really what you should be talking about is culture add. Adding to your culture is what drives diversity and inclusion within your business. Think about how you can develop a recruitment team that is heavily focused on recruiting towards positively biasing towards diversity and inclusion. And all the other elements that I've highlighted here really give you the opportunity to start. So it's not difficult to start. When you look at it, when you look at the parts of the whole sum, it makes life a lot easier to drive diversity and inclusion. So when you think about it in totality, it can be very difficult. It can be challenging. Break it down into its component parts, and you will see step by step that you will start getting to a better place with your diversity and inclusion within your teams. Thank you.
Good job. Super first talk. Thank you, Ali, and the team at Zoom Info. So next up, she can share the story about how we actually first met, but it was some time ago, and it's incredible to see the journey that Brigid Fox, who is a revenue leader, a multilingual sales leader, who is going to be talking about rethinking success as a revenue leader. Now, she's had a fantastic and early successful career at data businesses like MuleSoft and Databricks, where she started right from the beginning as an SDR, making her way through to AE and then building regional enterprise sales teams. So she's had that proven success in hyper-growth SaaS businesses, but since 2020, she's been responsible for advising and consulting early-stage founders at seed to Series A, taking that transition from founder-led sales to building out a go-to-market team and having a fully fledged sales function. She's also an advisor to a number of companies across the fintech and online space. So can we have a round of applause for Brigid, please?
Thank you. All right, there's nothing like having your first speaking slot since the pandemic in front of 250 sales leaders, so go easy. I also don't have any presentation slides, so I'm just going to play with my hands and things. But so James has actually stolen a bit of my thunder there, because I met James back in 2013. And so when we were preparing for this session, and I was talking to James, I was kind of filling him in on the moves that I'd made since MuleSoft, which is when we first met. And James kind of asked me this question. He was like, Brigid, you spent your first 7 years of your career at these kind of poster child high growth companies, right? Where you had world-class leadership, world-class products, that hockey stick growth that everybody just aspires to. Why, oh why have you gone into this horrible, murky, risky space of seed stage businesses? It doesn't make sense, right? But I think inherent in that question was this assumption of what success looks like as a sales leader, right? And successful trajectories of sales leaders look like growing revenue at an astronomical rate and getting promoted year on year, effectively growth. And that made me realize just how much my own notion of success has changed in the past 2 to 3 years, and that's what I wanted to share a little bit about today. So maybe a bit of context would be helpful. So as James said, I spent some time at MuleSoft and Databricks, and the measure of success there is revenue, right? The model was growth at all costs. That's a model which I think all of us in this room probably grew up with professionally. It's kind of a model for a different economic time now. But in that model, you are all about the revenue number, right? That is what investors want, that is what the market wants, and so that is what we did. I was defined by my number, and the business was defined as successful when it exceeded its revenue numbers too. But I think what became really, really clear after a few years of working in those environments was that that growth at all costs model has its downsides. Some of them are financial, and we're starting to see that play out in the bear markets. We're seeing companies that grew really fast without a sustainable revenue base now paring back and unfortunately making layoffs, seeing valuations completely stripped. I think there's an ecological cost which we're more aware of than ever, thankfully, and I look back in shame when I think about the international flights that I jumped on to do calls and meetings with customers, which I now do in pajamas in my living room on Zoom. But I think the most important and kind of painful impact and cost of that growth at all costs model was on people, right? And that is something that I felt personally. I was all about the number. I exceeded my number outwardly, was extremely successful, right? I was traveling the world, I was exceeding my quota, I was buying the house, I was getting the commission checks. But I have never been less connected to my community, to my family, to my friends, and to my sense of purpose. And unfortunately, that came to a head in 2019 when I was signed off with burnout. And I subsequently made the decision that that was not a sustainable life for me. I left my position. In that moment, I have never felt more like a failure, because everything we're supposed to want as sales leaders is that trajectory, right? I walked away from that trajectory, and many people in my life, in my world, asked me what I was going to do next, because that was meant to be the pinnacle. So for a long time, I thought that sales leadership and having a connection to purpose and sustainability were just a dichotomy. Like, it just wasn't possible to do both. And so I took some time off. I took 8 months off. I slept a ton. I got a dog. I trained my dog. He's still not that well trained. And I actually started studying an MBA. And the MBA had a focus on climate change and business strategy, so how we could evolve business in the face of climate change. And my goal there was not to come back into sales, but to think about taking a different path, that was more aligned maybe with my sense of meaning and purpose and my values. But in this MBA, I came across a different way of measuring and thinking about success in business, right? And it was called the triple bottom line. Hands up if you've heard of the triple bottom line. Okay, not too many. So triple bottom line boils down to 3 Ps: people, planet, and profit, in that order. And there's a ton of research out there, and all of it points to the fact that businesses that actually focus on people and on planet first drive better financial results than the companies that focus just on profit. All right, and we're seeing that more and more play out in the business world today. So this was just amazing for me because it was contrary to everything that I'd grown up with. It was contrary to everything that I had ever worked with before. And I decided from that moment that that would be my mantra for success, right? I would focus on people and planet first, and I would hope that that means that profit would follow in a more sustainable way. And although I wasn't intending to come back into sales, I suddenly realized, actually, if businesses are more financially profitable, if they're actually more successful by focusing on people and planet, then it has to be that sales teams would be too. And so fast forward a few years, I'm actually the VP of revenue for a seed stage data and AI company. And this comes back to the question that I kind of posed at the beginning, which is, why early stage? And early stage really because when you have none of the foundations and the baggage of how you measure success, when you can start from scratch and kind of choose to build and measure differently, you can really experiment, you can really try to build something in a different way. And so at Afeiris, we are early stage, we're growing fast, and we are building differently. And concretely what that means is we focus on the 3 Ps. So across planet, we do lots of things. One of them is not giving away swag at events like at Big Data today that's just going to go straight to landfill. But that's pretty surface. I think maybe what people in this room might be more interested in is we've decided as an early stage business that even though our platform could be used in pretty much any industry and use case, we are focusing solely on impact use cases with businesses that will drive some kind of positive impact on society or the environment. What might be less obvious is that we're also saying no to things, right? And trust me when I say having a conversation with a CEO when you're pre-revenue about actively turning down projects that don't align with your values is not the easiest thing to do, but to his credit, he went with it. So if Shell come asking us to help them optimize their drilling process for oil, we're an impact-driven company that cares about climate and sustainability, we will say no, even if it's revenue, right? So that's planet, but that's also had a huge and positive impact on people. Now, there's a statistic that came out from a McKinsey report, I think a couple of weeks back, that said that 70% of people get their personal sense of meaning and purpose from the work that they do, and that if they feel that connection in their work, they're half as likely to leave their jobs. By having a mission focus and by really living out those values, we've actually been able to recruit really top-tier talent to Afeiris, even though we're seed stage, right? We don't have the branding of MuleSoft and Databricks, but we have some fantastic leaders and individual contributors who've joined us because they feel that we're doing something seriously different. And on the work sustainability side of things, we are doing everything as leaders to model a different working culture. I personally work 4 days a week, and I have never been more productive. We encourage flexibility around working when it suits people, and so that they can integrate the rest of their lives into their working practices. And a lot of people probably sat there going, yeah, you've talked about people, and you've talked about planet, but are you actually selling anything? Because this is a sales event, right? It sounds a bit kumbaya. But what I will say is that the profit aspect has absolutely come along with us. So we are an early stage business, but within 9 months of launching our product in December, we actually reached 1 million in ARR from a standing start, right? 0. That is working with top tier pharma companies, top tier manufacturing companies, and just a handful of other global companies working in the data space. So profit is absolutely coming, and I am sure that as a company, as we grow, it's going to get harder to hold on to those values. But I am really motivated by the fact that as a sales leader, I can be defined by my impact way beyond a revenue number, and that actually in this climate, it makes more sense to focus on impact on planet and people than being single-mindedly focused on a number. So I hope you can take some value from that and keep me honest as we go through the next few years, because again, it's harder when you're scaling. But I wanted to share that with you and hope that you've taken something from that. So thank you.
That's Brilliant. Thank you so much. Really interesting. The triple P thing, people, planet, profit. There's a bit about purpose there as well, isn't there, which links on really nicely. I remember being taught in the early stages of my career by somebody who's a bit of a mentor called Nicky Sydney, and he told me that success is about how you feel, not what you do. And I think that's a really key sort of link to take away there. And yes, Seed's where it's at. It's so much more fun getting something started. So brilliant talk. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to our third speaker, James, playing with slides. Thank you very much. Nicola Doherty, who's the Director of Enterprise at Gong. She is going to be talking about how to identify risk as a sales leader. To give you some context, Nicola joined Gong in May of this year as their Director of Enterprise. She spent some time at LinkedIn as other places covering multiple markets and products. And prior to this, spent 3 years at Pearson in Australia as well. So done some sales manager and head of sales time on another continent, which is always interesting to hear the context. Particularly having spent 8 years in Australia myself, it's a lovely place to do business. But Nicola is going to be on the stage talking about how to identify risk as a sales leader. Please give her a round of applause and welcome her to the stage. Thank you very much.
A little part of me is wondering, was it a strategic decision that I got paired up with Owen because our height is kind of more comparable? I'll leave that with you. I would imagine that was very smart. Oh, right, okay, maybe not the same. Everybody, it's amazing to be in a room with over 200 people. The last time I did this was on Zoom, and I'm really regretting not having the little notes on the screen beside me. So just bear with me now. I am with Gong, so I've got two hats. Even though I don't have the head for hats, I still wear two. One is the enterprise new business side, and then I also look after our customer business here in EMEA. So that's everything from SMB to enterprise. And so what's top of mind for our customers at the moment, for a lot of them, is how do we mitigate churn amongst this economic uncertainty? And so I thought, given I have a couple of minutes, I thought that would be a place where to start. So I don't think there's a single person in this room that's not in some way experiencing headwinds between what's going on outside in the outside world from an economic perspective. What we're looking all to do is build sustainable, resilient businesses that will thrive no matter what storm kind of comes to play. And what's at the core of that, ultimately, like where our most robust revenue sits is with our loyal customers. And that's where we're going to find that organic growth as a business. And so what I wanted to do was kind of share just a couple of insights about why that is important, but also a couple of the tactics that I feel, this is lovely, this clicker really works, tactics that I think that you can take away and apply to your businesses. So I find this to be really interesting. So there's two studies that I'll talk about because I love numbers. So the first one was that this study here was done by Bain & Company. And essentially what they did was they looked at companies, and if they had, in this study, they increased their customer retention by 5%. And that ended up impacting over 25% of their bottom line. And so it was actually between 25 and 95%, which is absolutely unbelievable. But that study was about 10 years old. So, I mean, you could take that with a pinch of salt. So I went out and I Googled again, and there was another study where they were looking at specifically SaaS companies, and they were looking at where companies had reduced their churn by 1%. That had ended up having an impact on their bottom line of 7%. So they had 7% return just simply by reducing their churn by 1%. And so, what I also compared with, what was interesting was in that study, they looked at their new business customers as well. And what they found that with the new business customers, with that same 1% uplift in customer acquisition, you'll only have a 3% uplift in your bottom line. So acquiring new customers but churning the ones that you have ultimately will lead to much lower growth to your company. In fact, if you had a company that had the same new business acquisition rate and the two of them had a 5% gap in their customer churn, the customer with the lowest churn would be 500% higher in revenue than the second customer, just simply because their retention was so good. I've been clicking this button now for about 2 minutes and nothing has changed. So thank you very much. Oh, now I can wander. This is great. And so the reason for that is because on the new business side, it costs so much more to acquire customers. So you're talking about a much more expensive cost of acquisition. So you're talking about 5x higher to acquire a new customer than to retain the ones that you have. So hopefully now you're all thinking, absolutely, we need to retain our customers and lower our churn. We go to the next one. And so what we're finding, and it's very interesting, like I've been working in the renewal business now for a long time, and what I'm finding that the trends that I'm seeing over the last couple of months are significantly different than what I would have seen a year ago, 2 years ago. And what I wanted to kind of summarize was some of the, I don't know what's going on with the mic here, but what I'm seeing is some of the changes, the trends that we're pulling out. And this is across aggregate data, across the Gong customer base, because we're selling to salespeople. So what we're seeing across the base is obviously decision makers are changing. So what the people who would have been involved in making decisions this time last year, maybe it was a decision at a director level previously, that's going up to either CFO or higher within the organization. They're assessing value of their acquisitions in a different way. They're looking for very concrete ROI. And because as well as that, we're seeing a significant increase in the number of decision makers across the organization that's involved in these acquisitions, that also has an impact there as well. The reduction in budgets is very real, and we're absolutely seeing it over the last couple of months as companies, particularly earlier stage, are looking to increase their runway by cutting costs. So you're seeing that. And what I'm also seeing is an appetite for risk has decreased. So previously, a lot of companies would have made acquisitions with the expectation or the hope that they would have seen results within a range. What they're looking for now is, given the amount of complexity internally as well as externally, buyers now are under a lot of pressure to show strong ROI for their spend. And so their appetite for risk is decreasing all the time. And what that means is much more, I suppose, on the new business side. But we are seeing it on the customer retention side as well. If you're looking for ambitious growth goals with some of your customers, what you might find is there's a roadblock there mentally about taking some of those bigger risks that they might have done 12 months ago. We go on to the next one there. Now, I'll get to the watermelon in a second. It's not just because I want just to have a cocktail after this. But essentially, if I was to call out like 3 tips that I would emphasize, one is the importance of segmenting your customers. So just like in the pandemic, not all customers experienced the pandemic in the same way. There were customers who were adversely affected, but there were other ones, like for example, Gong, that absolutely thrived in that environment because it was a product that was so needed at the time as companies put a lot of their like field sales forces online for almost overnight. And so the important thing that I would highlight here is it's to make sure that your sales teams are prioritizing the right customers and we're engaging with the market in the right way. So one approach that I would suggest is segmenting them based on what is the economic impact that they're feeling at the minute. So you could break them down into adversely impacted, a neutral impact, and a positive impact. In that way, your sales team will apply the right strategy to the right customer, and you're not ignoring the growth opportunities that are there in your book, but at the same time you're prioritizing where that risk is, where again, remember, you've got that 7x return if you can keep those customers in. Now, the reason why there's a watermelon, I actually don't like watermelon, and I don't know if this is a Nicola thing or a market thing, but everybody should be familiar with like watermelon KPIs. Has everybody kind of heard that? No? Okay. Anybody heard of watermelon accounts? All right, maybe this is a Nicola thing. Okay, I've invented this. Okay, so my tip here is to find the watermelons in your accounts. And ultimately what I'm talking about is the accounts that look green on the outside, but they're red on the inside. So you're talking about accounts where maybe, for example, their engagement rates are so high. You know, they're using it all the time. You know, you're looking at it, you're looking at your data, and you're like, these customers here love the product. And then you dig in and you understand the context behind it. And you actually talk to the customer and you're like, oh yeah, it's great. I love the concept of what it is. But I don't see any differentiated value between you and somebody else. You know, so all of a sudden, If you're having that conversation, you've just sent your commercials, you've got 2 months out from the renewal, and all of a sudden it's like, no, I can get this much cheaper from somewhere else. And you've got 2 months to go and change somebody's mind, and it's very difficult. We all have a decision bias, a confirmation bias. Once we make a decision, we do not want to change it. So if you've got a customer who's made a decision that they're going somewhere else, in 2 months' time, it's very difficult to turn that around. But what you want to do is find the watermelon so that you've got a bigger runway, because if you can find that out at 6 months, at 4 months, then all of a sudden, then you've got time to highlight what is the differentiated value between you and anybody else out there in the market. And all of a sudden, you're able to, that doesn't become a churn risk at the end, you're able to win that customer. So find the watermelon. So, those ones where the reps are like, oh yeah, everything's great. And you're like, no, it's not. So if we go to number 2. So I'm actually, on this slide here, I'm going to talk about the who and the what. So on the who, again, talking about the decision makers, they have changed. So you will have reps on your teams, or you are people sitting in chairs right now, and you're thinking about your book of business, and you're thinking, I have great relationships with my customers. I'm absolutely at power. There's no problem with that renewal. But all of a sudden you dig in, and actually what we know, that decision is no longer being made at that level anymore. You dig in, you find out, well, actually you're at a practitioner level, or you're just speaking to the head of sales. They're no longer your decision maker. It doesn't matter that you're buddies. It's actually going to have zero impact on your deal. If you're not talking at power, then now is the time that you need to be engaging with them. Now, what we also know is that there's more people involved in the decision-making process. So a couple of years ago, there was a study done where it had swollen to 10 people involved in the buy-in process. The most recent study done by Gartner is that is now up to 20 people. And so you have multiple different people across the organization. And we know from our stats, because Gong analyzes millions and millions of sales calls, that we know that the more people you have involved in the deal, the higher your win rates are. So having, for me with my team, being multi-threaded is just that is an absolute minimum. You have to be engaged across the organization, because if you're not, you are not speaking to value. And then the what that I would talk to here is they need, every single stakeholder you're engaging with have different priorities. They see value in a very different way. And if you remember that what we're seeing now is customers are getting much tighter on value. You have to make sure that you're maintaining a high standard and you're delivering tangible results. Because in the past, in my past experiences over the mass number of years, you would certainly have had renewals where customers weren't getting value from products, but they would have renewed anyway because they got enough value from the product to pay. Enough isn't enough anymore. You have to be hitting the mark. And because of the different stakeholders that we have now across the account, you need to make sure that you're differentiating your message for those people. So if you're talking to the CMO, you're talking to the CRO, their priorities are different, you need to tailor it in that way. So it's important to make sure that your solution or the problem you're solving for them is their problem and it's aligned specifically to them. So it's not just enough isn't enough anymore. It has to be spot on. And then the last thing, because I know I'm way over time, you're very good, is the last thing is about increasing that runway. I think it's been a kind of a theme throughout the whole chat, but ultimately at the end of the day, the most important thing that you need is time. So being able to identify those potential risks as early as possible is just critically important. So what I would say is I can't recall what great company did this report, but we can absolutely share it out with you. But of 20, in this report, 26 customers churned, only one of them complained. And I know this, I can speak from experience because I have this visibility across my pipeline. I can see where those risks come out over the course of the thing. They're not invisible. You can see, I can tell my rep when it's that's a risk account there. And they'll be like, no, it's great. And I'm like, no, that you need to do X, Y, or Z with that. That's a risk account. And in a number of weeks, you might find an actual trigger that comes up. But if we were only focusing on the lag measures, which is when a customer says, I'm not happy with X, or we're looking to consolidate this, or whatever it is, you're too slow. So identify what is the churn indicators or the risk indicators for your business. Most people will have, like, there's definitely indicators that are in common across most companies, but every business will have ones that are specific to your service or your product. And so do the analysis to understand what does that look like. And the last thing that I would say in that, is that use current and up-to-date data. If you are using, because most people have a CSM organization who have identified what are churn indicators for their customers, but if that's using data from a year ago, it's out of date and it's obsolete. You have to be using data that's accurate as of, say, the last 3 months, because that's when the world changed. And so on that mark, I will shut up, James. So thank you very much for your patience. Thank you, everyone.
I'm glad I'm useful for something. I'm really excited about our next speaker. One of the great things about, I guess, as most of you know, I appear in your inboxes most weeks. So I get to see where all the sales leaders end up, and I'm always querying, what decisions and reasons why they decided to make certain choices in their career. And Alice is quite an interesting one when she tells you the story of her current business, 1E. So Alice Carlisle is the VP of Sales at 1E. She's going to be talking about transforming a legacy product-centric organization to a high-performance sales culture. She's through and through medic. She talks about the 3 whys and understanding the importance of coaching and developing sales people and sales leaders. And since joining 1E, she's taken up her leadership position in January this year, and she's already driven EMEA region growth to 466% increase in sales headcount and delivered 200% year-on-year revenue growth and increased pipeline generation by 700%. So she's been very busy. Let's have a round of applause for Alice. 7 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I also, like Brigid, have no slides, and it's my first speaking event in front of this many people since COVID, apart from my best friend's wedding a few weeks ago, which was a slightly different topic. So as James said, I'm going to be talking to you all about transforming a legacy product-centric organisation into a high-performance sales culture. So when I decided to make my career move around this time last year, actually, I think everyone thought I was quite crazy when I decided to join a 25-year-old, 300-person organisation. So to put that into context, Salesforce is 23 years old, ServiceNow is 18 years old, and vastly different in where they are compared to 1E. So the first thing I did is, I think everyone in this room would do, is go out and do your due diligence, really ask the hard questions. What's the product? What's the market fit? What's the need? What's the ROI? In a market like now, you need to ask those questions even more. But for me, if you're taking a risk and you're going to a seed organisation, you're going to a company that's taking outside funding for the first time, so it's expecting big results, or it's a company that's had 25 years of history, like us, you really need to answer one big question, and that is, will you be enabled and supported to make the impact and the change you want to make? Will you be enabled and supported to ultimately achieve the goals they expect you to achieve? So after I answered that question, and did a lot of digging on it, I then had to come up with a plan of how am I going to make that impact? How am I going to transform a company that had less than 8 sales reps globally, and sales was the thing in the corner, that was less than 3% of their overall global headcount, to being someone that was completely focused on medic and best practice sales and high performance culture and driving not only double-digit year-on-year growth, but the expectation was to drive 100% year-on-year growth. So the first thing I put into place was, like most of you would, recruitment, finding the right people to build the right culture. Secondly, it was about the playbook, making sure you had the strong foundations. You can't build a strong high performance culture without the right foundations. And then lastly, it was about how to accelerate, because like I'm sure all of you know, there's pressure to go faster, there's pressure to hit the number, there's pressure to hire more, and you have to keep up with all of that. So on the recruitment piece, again, a bit like I think Brigid mentioned earlier, how do you compete in a market where you've got not the biggest marketing budget, 25 years of, oh, that guy, well, what do they do? Are they still around? Ealing, why are you based in Ealing? So all of these challenges to contend to when it came to hiring and wanting to hire the same people as everyone else in the market, right? People that are going to be high performance sales reps for you. So that's the coachability, it's the intelligence, it's everything that everyone else wants. So I think understanding for us what we needed that everyone else needed, but also what we needed 1E. We needed people with grit and determination and people that wanted to be the underdog, that were comfortable being the underdog, were comfortable not having the biggest stand at the events, not having a flow of leads coming in, and really put that into your recruitment process so you know what you need as a standard, but what you need for your little ecosystem. And then the next thing for us really was, how are we going to land these people? Everyone else wants them too. And so I think perfecting your recruitment process, making sure it's the best process you can possibly imagine, making sure you make them feel challenged, but also you make them feel respected. You make them feel like they're important, but you also make them feel like, gosh, this is going to be a great ride. So that was a key thing. And then the next thing really was about understanding what our differentiators are. Like you're doing a sales process, why would they choose you rather than a big pile of RSUs over here? Or why would they choose anything else that's in the market? And really we couldn't compete on that. But what we could compete on were things that made us differentiated. And I think all of you will know that about your own organisations and see that how you apply it in your sales processes. The reasons why I joined are the reasons why a lot of my team then joined. And then moving on to the playbook. So I was lucky enough, as James said, to work under some amazing leaders and see how Medic and the 3 Ys and leading indicators and focus on PG could have such an effect on organisations. So how do you make that something you can build a foundation on? And really it's leading from the front and you have to live, breathe it every day. One thing we did there as well, this is where the test really came into it, of would I have the ability to make the impact and the decisions I wanted? So I pushed to get force management in. It was a huge investment, external training, world-renowned, but got them in for sales kickoff, got them to support me in areas that hopefully one day we can do internally, but whilst we don't have those huge enablement budgets and that enablement team already here, what could we do to outsource some of that? So then after you've got the playbooks there and you really have to operationalise it, it's how do we accelerate? You know, I joined in January with a host of new reps and the numbers breathing down your neck. You know, I had to grow the team from 2 to 10 in a very quick succession, but also hit the number. And one thing I'd say there is I learned a lesson, don't mishire. Don't fall into that trap of seeing, okay, I've got the number coming, I'm just going to make some exceptions, I'm just going to let that person in, they could be all right, because that will end up biting you in the arse later on. So really learned that lesson of no mishiring. And the acceleration now for us was buying the right tools. And I was laughing with Nicola earlier and Ali about some of the fact that I really had to put the pressure on sales ops to make sure we had the tools we needed. Not the tools that I needed as a sales leader, not the tools that our CEO needed, but the tools that the reps needed to do a better job. Their job's hard enough when they're trying to ramp and build pipeline. And in the market we're in now, how do we make their jobs easier? So it was tools like Chorus, which is very similar to Gong, and allowed me to coach more people, allowed me to really push that process, encourage their own reflection, encourage their own learning, encourage team peer-to-peer learning. It was tools like Cognism as well as Zoom Info. Finding numbers to help PG, let's make the investment there. So what I'd say my key takeaway and my key learnings for you all would be, don't be afraid to make that jump into that risky decision, even in the current climate, but make sure you can really answer that question around the level of impact you can have. And then make sure you focus on what is your plan of impact and how do you execute. So that's all for me. Hopefully it was useful.
I absolutely love the political correctness of Chorus that's like Gong, and Zoom Info that's like Cognism, and Jiminy. And let's just make sure we cover them all. Well done. Thank you very much. Make sure all people get mentioned. So next speaker up, last one for the evening, and then we'll do a little bit of a panel discussion as well. Pete Blackhurst, who's the Vice President of International Sales at Trackforce Valiant. He's going to be talking about how to build a winning culture. So Trackforce Valiant, the world's leading security workforce management solution. Pete's a sales leader with over 20 years experience in enterprise, tech and SaaS across multiple verticals. And he prides himself on his ability to build high performance sales teams. What's interesting is that in his spare time, he loves he loves all things sport, coaching both football and cricket teams. And this week, it's in his notes, but he's also told me he's not only a keen triathlete, but is off to do an Ironman this weekend, which he's called a middle distance Ironman, which it consists of 90 kilometers of cycling, a half marathon, and a tiny little swim. I'm not sure. I think it's like a length of a pool or something, but that's not middle distance to me. So he's obviously a pretty competitive guy. So you can see where he gets his high performance sales culture mindset from. So please welcome Pete to the stage for his talk.
Thank you, everybody. It is lovely to be here. I'll be brief because there's a bar out there, 200 sales leaders in the room. They're getting quite thirsty. How to build a winning culture. It's difficult to define in 7 minutes, okay? A little bit of a story. I come from a culture where the first day on my first sales job, 22 years ago, I'm old now, was a Yellow Pages. Everyone remember those? And a phone. Make some dials. That was the onboarding I got. Now, the culture there wasn't great. There was a bit of toxicity. I didn't stay long at the organization because of that. But raise of hands. Who here thinks their culture in their organization could improve? All your faces are facing this way. The camera won't see you. 1. Okay. It's great to come last because everyone here has spoken about things that I'm going to be talking about today. I've coined my methodology, which is sort of the 5 C's or the 5 pillars of C that go through each individual thing. I bring into an organization when I get parachuted in because the previous manager wasn't performing or the sales team weren't performing, whatever. You know, I've been into many different organizations, 0 to 1 million, 1 to 10 million, exiting numerous organizations, and I always see a direct correlation where there's some bad culture. Okay, so define culture. For me, I coin it as 5 C's. Now, the true thing of a leader is to inspire people to do great things every single day. That's why I'm a leader. Not because of the number. The number comes always if you put the right things in place. And also, the VP title, it's not permanent. The way you treat people will always be remembered. Take that, honestly. That was the biggest thing I've learned over the course of my career because it will come to bite you in the backside moving forward. So, there's a lot of studies on this. High culture inside of organizations or driving winning cultures. There's a direct correlation with fantastic culture scores, high performance. High performance, toxicity, burnout. Brigid, you mentioned it before. Everyone's done it. Everyone's chasing the number. It's end of quarter. Should I be here now? Or should I be berating my teams to go and close some more deals? Absolutely not. If you've implemented the correct strategies, then of course they should be doing what they do every day, is closing deals and speaking to customers. Okay, so the 5 C's. Common goal. What is that? Everyone knows Simon Sinek, I'm sure. I've stole this off him. If you don't know Simon Sinek, go and watch his TED Talk. It's probably the third most watched of all time. What is our why? If you don't know what your why is, go and give up. Do you know what your why is on a day in, day out basis? Do your team know what your goal is? If they don't, they should do. Companies know what they do and how they do it, but they don't know their why. So it's important when you're coming into an organization, and of course over the first 3 to 6 months, everyone sees this new leader and they're not transparent with you and they don't want to obviously be open and honest with you, but of course the why is the common goal that you need to get to on a day in, day out basis. Moving on from there, it's communication and trust. It doesn't take one person to change the culture inside of an organization. It takes everyone. But if you've got someone underpinning that inside the organization, then of course you've got a good start. And that's very, very important, especially for me. You know, communication, organizational change is difficult. You've got one on board, then you've got loads of silos. I'm sure everyone knows what a silo is, and they've got them inside their organization. It does my head in. No transparency inside of organization. And everyone's gone more siloed now because of Slack and Zoom and Teams and all of that. But we're coming out to the wide world now, and people want to get together, which is fantastic. but there are still silos, and there's lack of communication inside of an organization. So if you manage to break that, then of course you're on the path to winning in that culture. Now there's collaboration. You have to collaborate as a team. Now I'm not a leader because I want to tell everyone what to do. That's a waste of my time. Yeah, I'm a good leader because I hire people that are better than me at what they do. Simple. Yeah, if they know more things than me, fantastic. A lot of people don't do that. When they hire people that are worse than them because they don't want to be overshadowed. Well, what a load of nonsense. So the best leaders in the world will hire people who can do things that they don't do. Now, they foster their ideas, collaborate together. Of course, right? Get on these team huddles on Team or Zooms, or go to the pub, I don't really care. You need to understand what your team want. If they don't have a voice, they need to have a voice, they will leave. Toxicity in the workplace, the number one killer for people to churn. Yeah, who's left a workplace because their leader was a narcissist? Yeah, there we go. We've all been there. I'm sorry to be so direct, I am very direct, but it's a big problem in the workplace now. And everyone, what I'm saying, I hopefully can relate to what I'm saying tonight, because it's true. Right, next, continuous learning. We talk about onboarding. I told you about my story earlier in my career. Continuous learning. I've seen different ways of people doing this. They will treat everyone the same, and they won't focus on key strengths and weaknesses of any single individual. Of course you need to focus on that, of course you do. But at the same, you need to promote team learning at the same time. And it's not, here's a weekly one-on-one. I'm just going to put an hour-long call in your diary to waste loads of time, because that's what everyone does day in, day out. Have a good agenda, and put the agenda in there and focus on where they want to get to from now until the future. Not what their number is or how they didn't hit it or their performance. Of course, you're going to go through that. You've got your dashboard set up in Salesforce. But really focus on that person, what they want to do. Continuous learning as a team, again, a number big thing about how you drive a winning culture. If you're not speaking together, then how are you going to drive that culture across that team? And the last but not least is competition. And I don't mean competition with your competitors. I mean competition internally. Now, this is a difficult one, because we've all got A players inside of our organizations who are great. Some think they're better than others, and some are just a real pain in the backside. We all know them, yeah, and they're great, and they bring a lot of revenue. But to be cutthroat here, do you keep them inside the organization? In my opinion, no. Because they don't want to share. They want to be competitive, and they want to be the number one, but they don't want to help the C and B players to get up to an A player. So for me, they go out, and you foster the idea that you have everyone together collaborating. You bring C players in and B players in, and you get them together with the A players. The A players want to share. Of course, the A player then goes up to a manager, and then is a natural manager. The worst is you just put an A player who's never managed before into a... And that's the effect that I have. There we go. Wow. I don't think I can finish it. But that was perfect timing. So on that note, no. So yeah, look, we've all had those issues.
Did you get that on film?
Yeah, I think hopefully. Bloody hell. So, yeah, so the C players and B players and A players. Who's had a manager who was an A player who went into management and was useless? Yes, there we go. Now, because they're toxic and they don't care about anyone else apart from themselves. That's a simple thing. Get that outside of the organization, and that's another thing of how you can drive that winning culture inside the team, the organization, and it gets, you know, it gets the team moving and gets the teams going. So focus on the people, not on the number. If you do that, the number follows in the end. I'm Pete Blackhurst. Thanks very much.
I can't follow that. I don't have any magic tricks. There's no Darren Brown here. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, we just set that up earlier. Did we not tell you? No. Oh, sorry. Okay, so, do you know, I heard a phrase once about your A-player thing. My guys in my team will have heard this before. Better a hole than an A-hole. Which I think is really valid. It's really valid. You're better to have nobody there performing than you are someone that's toxic. So, really good point. Could I invite the speakers back up to the stage, please? We're going to take some questions from the audience. Please welcome them back up. If you have a question, pop your hand up. I think we'll send a microphone around, or you might have to shout a bit loud. If anyone's got a question now, you're welcome to go. Otherwise, I will launch us, which is often what happens. Yeah, okay, fair enough. All shy, you'll come out in a minute, it's fine. So, Ali, I'm going to start with you, if that's all right. And if anybody wants to answer the question, by all means, pop your hands up and you're welcome to. We don't have to go along, everybody, for every question. One of the questions that I have been asked in the past when talking about diversity, and really valuable points in there, and fully on board with what you're saying, is that, and I'd be interested to get your answer, is are there any challenges that come as a result of building a diverse team? So I think sometimes it's really easy to stay in your lane, isn't it? Do what you're doing, do what you understand. But with hiring a diverse team, whether that be culturally, whether that be people of different backgrounds, whether it be age, whether that be race, whatever it might be, suddenly you've got people in front of you don't understand as well. And I guess that brings challenges that sometimes people don't think about. Be keen to just get your thoughts on some of those challenges and how you overcome them or embrace them, or indeed proactively make sure that they're a benefit rather than a negative.
Yeah, great question. I think the way to actually look at it is what opportunity do those challenges bring? Because if you're being questioned on your status quo, then that's going to help you broaden your horizons. I mean, one of the very cliche sayings is that travel removes ignorance from an individual. So I think this is similar to that, where you are forcing a change, and that change is driving you to start thinking differently. Does it do you have to be more politically correct, so on and so forth? All of these things that you may not have done previously, I think is something that you need to then look in the mirror and to decide whether those are things that you'd appropriately say in the new forum that you have. But I think it's about driving change and forcing yourself to change to be able to create those, to avoid challenges and embrace it as opportunity.
And just a second point of that, those unconscious bias you talked about, can you give some really tangible examples of those? So, for example, you gave one which was the names on a CVs, and I've seen that, and I've heard another story about somebody who was a female in an account management role, managing a client, having a difficult conversation, and used her colleague's male-named email address to handle that inquiry, with the same response, got a very different comeback, because we assume it's a male versus a female. Just two examples. Are there any others that you've seen that we may battle with?
Well, I live with two. Yeah. I'll give you one of them. So my first name is Ali, and my work colleagues in the workplace call me Ali. Why did I choose that when everyone at home, friends, family, call me by my middle name? Well, actually, it's probably a lot easier to say Ali in an open environment.
Your middle name is?
It's Zishan. So for me, when I think about it, I'm thinking when I go into a work environment, I just want to make my life easier to make it more pronounceable. Number two challenge is I'm from a place in West London called Hounslow. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of it. I have learned to become more eloquent in the way that I speak. I don't always speak like this. But I've learned to be able to create an environment where this makes sense, and people might see me as more credible, more authentic than the way that I may speak with friends.
You should hear James at the weekend. Right, would anyone like to add anything on those topics? Please do. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I would just say what I found really interesting, Ali, about your talk was, I think we think about gender balance a lot. I think we think about, ethnicity. But I think increasingly as well, I'm seeing just the real benefits in neurodiversity, right? Having people who think differently. And I think you can hire for that when you're looking at cultural kind of diversity as well, in terms of having different ways of thinking. But just an example, there are people on my team that have ADHD, and they are bringing such a different way of thinking to the team that I just would never have even considered. And I think there's just a huge value in thinking about diversity, not just as gender and ethnicity, but also different ways of thinking, different cultures as well.
Not just as something you can see, but something in the way that people are. Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Any questions? Yes, we'll go here. Thank you. Yeah. Feel free to stand up. If you want to say your name and where you're from, it'd be great.
And now I'm noticing that more and more friends are going into it because they're seeing that we're becoming more successful. So how would you say companies can work better in getting the name out there? Because a lot of people hate tech companies, but they just look at it like, I want to be a doctor. I want my kids to be a doctor or a lawyer. But how would you
Yeah, so Sam, great question. I think, when I think of that, it just reminds me immediately back from when I was in financial services or fintech and I was moving into ad tech. My parents looked at me like, what is Google? It just bring back thoughts on that process. But I think, for us at Zoom Info, like if we look at the faces around us, that's the way that we drive interest. Because people like you and I can actually then be representative of the people that look at us and say, oh, I could do that. And it actually makes it more representative. So I think we should drive it, and it starts from some of the ideas that I spoke about on the stage today.
Does anyone else want to add anything on that? Nicola, do you want to pass the mic on to Nicola? Have you got the lapels working? Brilliant, fine.
I don't know, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good, we're good.
I think there was an example from when I was working at LinkedIn. I feel like we at the end, when I left, I was there for 5 years, we had gotten to a place where we had gotten to 50% gender diversity across the sales organisation, which is almost unheard of across the whole company. And I think while diversity in terms of, like, it's the easiest thing to measure, so diversity in other spaces, it wasn't quite 50-50, but where I saw that the tangible benefits, the impact over that 5-year journey was actually when the responsibility from it pivoted from being a TA-led initiative or a people-led initiative to being something that was owned by the sales leadership. Because we used to have a phenomenal sales lead who would eyeball you and be like, why is your team full of dudes? Or, why is every single person on that team look like me, sound like me? And so it was a thing that was built into our KPIs as leaders that under our leadership OKR that we needed to have gender diversity or diversity within the team. And I think until responsibility for it moves out of TA, where us as leaders, we have to build our own pipeline. We're responsible for nurturing talent that we want to have come into the business. If we leave it all to TA, we're just not going to be able to have that change come in because, it can be difficult because the pool is quite small. So it's an effort for everybody to engage widely and build that pipeline to bring it into your companies.
Liam, I'd love to just pass the mic along to you and just get your thoughts on this topic. With a man with many accents, be keen to get your thoughts on diversity. And as you go into new territories and start thinking about growing the market, I'm guessing this is something that has to be on your agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll maybe speak to a previous experience in growing a team where I was able to assemble a team of gender diverse individuals and actually age diverse. And to your point, the breadth of depth and different experiences and different ideas we brought to the fore was massive. And actually, Ali, I'll maybe share something that you put in my head. And I haven't figured out what the answer is yet, but I'll level a criticism at myself. So just made an offer to a female candidate of colour, and I realised when you were talking that through the sales process that like kind of 3 key people she met looked like me. And I haven't figured out how we fix that or if we need to fix that yet, but that was one kind of challenge I leveled at myself, and don't know what I do about that, but came up my head.
Great question to ask, and I think that's to Ali's point, that's the starting point, right? Is that you're asking the question and we're aware of it. And with that comes change in thought process and decision making in the future. Keen to get back out to the audience. Fire away.
So, John Canaldo, Sales Bags. And I know that LinkedIn, to Nicola's point, have done an awful lot with their product to help diversity. In terms of you've got product features that now help people. And I'm interested from the Zoom Info point of view and from anybody else on whatever. Do your products actually promote diversity? I mean, I know you're speaking as a company point of view, but what about everybody else's company as a result of your products?
I'm going to get somebody else to go rather than Ali because I think he's hogging the limelight a little bit. Anyone want to have a think about that? Can products promote diversity? Do they in any way? Ali, we might be defaulting back to you because no one's...
Security software.
It's okay. Perhaps you can give your thoughts. Around...
Is this a sell?
No, well, I just think that Zoom Info are in a wonderful position and cognizant as well in terms of the information that they provide could possibly help diversity. I'm not sure whether it does or not, though. That's why
Have you got any thoughts, Ali?
Yeah, I can share some. So, great question. Again, thank you for asking that. ZoomInfo is a product suite, so we have multiple different OSs that sit across the different product lines. One of the solutions or the services that we provide to businesses is a service called Talent OS. Talent OS specifically helps you identify candidates that are a right fit or right match for your business. So not only does it identify right fit candidates, but it also helps you to then start scaling down and start focusing or positively biasing your efforts to be able to drive diversity. Whilst we don't have a diversity switch, because as we've spoken about or heard here, there are elements of diversity that are seen and unseen. But so I think where you need to start is actually think about what you want to use it for, and then the impact of that then is driven at a human level as opposed to the technology driving that for you.
So the great thing is such a good question. I don't think anyone knew how to answer it, but it's actually a really valid one and a really good point because it gets you thinking, and I think that's brilliant. I'm going to try and move us on from diversity for a second. I think your speech was so good that people want to focus on it, and it's an important topic, right? But I just want to touch on something around the change in the market that seems to be there. We've heard talks of recession. We've heard talks of VCs starting to focus on efficiency of growth, and I think this leads, Brigid, back to your point around it's not all about top number, but it's starting to be about revenue, it's starting to be about profitability, it's starting to be about efficiency of investment and accountability around, I've put some money in your company, let's see what that returns versus how quickly can we grow revenue at all costs. Just love to get anybody's take on this, and not everybody has to go around, whether they've seen any change in the tonality or the sort of talk that's happening in market around investments, next investments rounds, all that kind of stuff. Brigid, go.
Basically fresh off the back of an investment round that started in January, and actually when we were building our investment strategy, in January the world looked very different actually, right? So the kind of trickle down from the public markets hadn't really hit the seed and Series A market yet. We were still very much kind of pitching for a certain level of investment at a certain level of growth over a certain number of years. It was very much kind of on track with that like high velocity, high growth, hockey stick nonsense, right? What changed? What changed is actually investors care less now for that growth at all costs that I was talking about. They're actually asking for a path to profitability, and they're asking for a route to that in a much shorter time frame. And so the level of investment that people are typically kind of offering now has gone down, but actually people are focused much more on how to grow that sustainably, right? So growth is going to be much slower. I think it's an interesting one too, though, because customers are kind of reacting to these markets in the sense that they are sort of asking us about our investment, and if you get investment in this market, it's a way bigger deal as well and a mark of success than maybe it was a few years ago. So I just wanted to add that perspective. I think there's some interesting stuff happening. Certainly our narrative completely changed, and what we are planning for has completely changed. Our runway is, planned to be a lot longer than it would have been, but I see that as a good thing.
Yeah, really timely point. And so had the opportunity this week, we actually had 6 Sense CEO in town. We sat down, had a bit of a town hall, and we talked about this exact thing. For context, 6 Sense raised twice last year, D&E. I think it was over 250 million across the 2 rounds. And it probably was at the time a conversation about, hey, like growth at all costs. That has now changed for us internally. It's, hey, what does that sustainable growth look like? It is investors talking about what a path to profitability may look like in future. So whilst the growth continues in our own sense, it's certainly a more measured approach.
Do we feel like that's a general feeling, or have we got some blind growth at all costs mentality still out there?
I think this is on. No, well, it's a little bit different for me because we're PE backed, right? And we've just acquired our largest competitor. I can't say because we're on camera for an undisclosed figure.
I think you've just blown the camera, mate. Don't worry about that.
But we're still talking about week in, week out on our C calls, CX calls, that, what are the headwinds and what's to be bullish about, because you have to have those in the marketplace. But investment's definitely out there. Of course it is. And when you're PE backed, there's always going to be investment, but they expect more. So, yeah, there are all our headwinds, but you'll talk about the headwinds and go, okay, well, what do we do to still achieve growth? So,
I'm going to go back to the audience. Question somewhere from the back, maybe. Yes, lady.
Hello, I'm Becky from Brigid.
Hi, Becky. I'm not busy to go. Every week, every time when we have sprint calls, they read the news, I read the news, we share links. The economy at the moment is in a bad place. The inflation's really, really high. You have to get it out there. People are going to be worried. There is still business out there. A lot of my team, they're first into management because I promoted them since I've been there. And this is one of the first ever quarters that we've had. It's been hard. Yeah, so they're worrying. And I'm like, you can worry, but there are the economic factors in place at the moment that means there's going to be a little bit of a downturn. But the best thing for a leader, don't think immediate, the end of the quarter. Think long term, 12 months' time. So that's the plan we're working towards. They will always look at the end of the quarter because that's how they've been drilled. So the best is to be transparent, talk about what the business is saying, and talk about what the market is saying.
Alice?
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I think, again, we're a PE-backed business, so we're maybe slightly different than the VC-backed or seed round level business. But for us, and me, the ADs that are in my team, it's all about having that passionate, unfiltered debate where we can talk about this stuff, get their concerns out there, understand what they're worried about. But I think pulling back for us, one of the biggest things we pull back to is the importance then of having the pipeline coverage and being really crystal clear on the sales process. So I said earlier, we use Medic, right? And so now more than ever, you need to understand where are the risks and your opportunities, multi-thread more. And I think constantly talking about that and coaching them and letting them see the great things that are happening in the company as well is a really important thing. So sitting down with your team and understanding, okay, ask your manager, what's coming down the line, where are they spending money, what's going on in their rooms, and they will answer the question, should answer the question, if it's a trustful environment. So yeah.
I was just going to say really quickly, agree with that point about just ultimate transparency, right? Like people know if they're not talking about it to you, they're talking about it to someone else. So just have the conversation. Don't feel like you need an answer because we don't know where this is going to go. And the other one that you said so eloquently, remember our buying teams have changed, right? We were maybe going to a manager or a director, now we're going to the CFO. So equip your salespeople to have that conversation, right? If they've got to go meet a CFO, make sure they're able to do that. So make sure your sales team are supported to go and have the conversations they need, I think.
Can we ask the question back? Sorry, you had.
After Brigid again.
Yeah, after Brigid.
I'm sorry, I'm just desperate to add this point. Is anyone familiar with Challenger Sale?
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyone use it?
No.
Like really use it? Okay, now's the time to dust it off because that was really based on data, like actual data around how to sell in an economic downturn. There's a new book out actually by Matt Dixon. I'm not on his PR team or anything. I just happened to be at a preview of it, and actually they've just done a whole new study on selling conversations that they were recording over the pandemic to look at how people were selling in basically a different type of downturn. The data is fascinating, and there are some really concrete risk mitigation strategies in that around how you can make the customer feel less like they're making a terrible decision and that decision's going to fall back on them, but also giving them commercial outs as well, which are things I think generally we always in a good market kind of avoid. Things like break clauses, things like saying, why don't you have 30 days for free and then we'll roll on unless you absolutely hate the product. But now is the time to deploy those strategies to reduce the risk on the person that is buying, because people are more worried about the decisions that they're making and their head being on the line. So go get Jolt. It's fantastic. I can't recommend it enough, and it's data-driven.
Go on, Pete, turn it on his head.
I just wanted to know, how is the information being filtered through at your organisation? Is it not being filtered through? Is that why you're concerned?
I think it's more of it's new territory for us.
Yeah.
I obviously was coming through my career during the pandemic.
Yeah.
My job at Jiminy in April
Uh-huh.
2020. So that was such an exception, and I think we've all of our generation. I'm 29, so we've all grown
Good,
up.
look at you.
Rubbish age.
Yeah.
So we've all grown up with this kind of 2008, the credit crunch.
Yeah,
and
of course.
I think that was, I don't know about you, Nick, but that was always in the back of our minds. You hear your parents talk about it, and it was always this big thing that affected so many other things. And I think lots of our team are of the same age, and we're just curious, I guess. So the way it's being communicated is exactly like you guys said. It's made me feel really comforted. It's incredibly transparent, but it's just so new to us that we don't know how to handle it ourselves as salespeople.
I think the right sales leaders will always be about no surprise management, right? They'll be communicating with you. The reality is they can't change your employer can't change the economy. They can't change if we're going into recession in isolation, but what they can do is give you clear communication so you can set your expectations properly. Ali wants to make one final point, guys, then I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up just for timing, but everyone's hanging around, so if you've got questions individually, you're welcome to come and do that. Ali, do you want to just wrap up?
Becky, just to your point, what I would say is, just to flip it on its head slightly, you as an individual who is going through what you feel like is a recession right now, focus on what you can control as opposed to what's outside of your control. To Owen's point, we can't control what the economy does. So as opposed to operating on the defensive when you're selling, operate on the attack. Because those are the things that looking at challenge sales methodologies and then being able to control your pipeline, growing your pipeline, that's what's in your control. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, but the best that you can do is to focus on what you have the ability to change.
Really good point. And for that point on the Challenger book, very interesting book. If you haven't read it, as Brigid said, strongly recommend it. It was one of my first sales books, actually. And I remember it's not about they're the only people to sell in a recession, but when it comes to a recession or any other economy, they're the people that will come out top consistently in any environment. And I think it's a really interesting read and well worth thinking about. When you think about the way you sell as an individual, so to Ali's point, take control of it. Think about how you sell, because different sales styles work better in different environments. Guys, I know there'll be loads more questions. Thank you for the questions that we've had. Thank you for a fantastic evening so far. I think the bar's still open for a bit, but if you could give our speakers a round of applause.
Thanks very much, guys. Take a seat. So just before we wrap up, just to give, really appreciate the preparation and effort that goes into these talks. Just a couple of points to make, things that are coming up. So some of you have been aware over the last 5 years, we've been kind of representing the top 50 individuals at SDR, SDR manager, IC and sales leader level. And this is now the 5th year that we're doing it. So we're about to open up the nominations. There's a mix of kind of art and science into how we then decide on those top 50 lists, but look out for the link and get nominating. And then the final point I just want to share is a lot of people, you come to these events and people then come to me afterwards and say, look, really enjoyed the content, got a lot of value out of speaking to individuals, but what more value can sales confidence provide? So just to highlight now, we do now have a private membership for those that are looking to accelerate their sales career. So if you're a leader and you want to connect with people on a close-knit basis, or you're an individual contributor looking to move into leadership, we now have a membership. And one of the things that Pete talked about was continuous development. What are you doing in your own continuous development? And so in part of the membership, we basically give you access to one-to-one mentorship, professional coaching, a peer group that you meet up with on a weekly basis, which is outside of your organization, and then have content that is masterclass based, and all that housed in a private networking group. So if you're interested in learning more, come speak to me. There'll be some more details. But to wrap up, I just want to say a big thank you to the speakers and a round of applause for everybody that's attended tonight and all our sponsors. Thank you very much.